Okay, so we are going to talk about how words changing, specifically semantic change, is dead in our reading of Scripture. We're going to stay in Genesis 1:1, and as you can see right off the bat, my title is interesting. God is awful, and maybe you already picked up on it. I want you to know that 200 years ago, I'd have a lot of nodding heads instead of heretics being said, because awful is just like awesome, right? It means worthy of awe. And so, yeah, of course, God is worthy to be given full awe. And so, yeah, I'm gay to start this out. I'm really happy, right, seeing if you're on page, to do this because we're going to look at Genesis 1 and hopefully clear things up because, I don't know, it's important. It starts the whole Bible, right? I put up some translations of the first verse of Genesis, and for you watchers, you probably can't see them, so I'll read a few of them. They're pretty similar. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. In the beginning, comma, God created the heavens and the earth. Some outliers. In the beginning, comma, God created the universe. In the beginning, God created heaven, comma, and earth. But pretty much all are in agreement here. There's some scholarly sources that do it a little differently, but here pretty much all are in agreement in our normal readings that this is how the Bible should be read. Well, I'm in the minority, and I'm going to present to you that maybe, not that these are wrong, but a more clear reading could be given to us if we understand that words change. And so let's just start, because I don't have a lot of time. Here's our reading of Hebrew and a rough translation into English. Bereshit bara Elohim af Shamaim af Eretz. And you should know right off the bat that I'm not a Hebrew scholar. I know how to use some tools. Everything that I'm saying to you has been taught to me by someone else. There's nothing new under the sun, right? Okay, so you can make your own decisions on it. Just see if the whole of the argument makes sense for the new one, not so much the details in it. Though, of course, they matter, and I'm going to give them to you as much as I know. So, Bereshit bara Elohim es Shamaim af Eretz. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Or so we think, right? So in the beginning, Bereshit is the first word of our Bibles. And I guess I just want to start with what does it mean. And so right off the bat, we have a problem with, and maybe you've heard and maybe you don't think it's a problem, but a lot of our teachings on Genesis are strictly to do with science, right? How long did it take to make the earth? How long were the days? Where did God get the matter? Where did God come from? Exactly how did it happen? You get the point? How did humans form? And I think this is actually getting the point off. Not to say that there's not conclusions to those and that God didn't have his hand in all of it, but I think that doesn't matter so much as what is the story really trying to tell us about God, right, and our relationship to him. And so we start with the story with in the beginning, Bereshit, and people agree, scholars agree, that Bereshit is not a technical term, not a scientific term. More so, it is like our word of a fairy tale, like once upon a time, right? And I'm not saying the Bible is a fairy tale, so be careful. I'm not saying it's fake or anything, but just hear this out. And then you can find this just on any Google search, right? Characteristics of a fairy tale. And so just see the parallels between this and the Bible and tell me what you think. It usually begins with once upon a time long ago or once there was. The story takes place in a distant or make-believe land, okay, a different land than we're used to, how about? It features imaginary characters such as dragons, fairies, elves, and giants. Things happen in 3s and 7s, 3 bears, 3 wishes, 7 brothers. Wishes are often granted. A difficult problem is solved at the end of the story. Good triumphs over evil. The story has a happy ending. Royal characters such as kings and princesses are there. Talking animals, magical elements such as magic beans, fairy dust, enchanted capsule. And I would be impressed if you could give me one of those things that are not found in the Bible. Of course, we have kings and queens and princesses and talking snakes and donkeys, and you have miracles or magic, and you do have magic as well in the Bible. You have prayers or wishes granted. There are some different in terminology and concepts, but the fundamental ideas are there. Dragons and spirits or fairies and giants, of course. In a distant land we don't know about the numbering of 3s and 7s, 12s as well. And right off the bat, though, how's the story always start? Usually a fairy tale starts with once upon a time and then ends with they live happily ever after. Well, the Bible ends with they ruled as kings and queens. Go check out Revelation 20, in the last couple chapters. And then it begins with in the beginning. And so it's not a technical term. I think rather it's just a simple once. It's start, the first, number one, once. It began. So something like that could start your Bible, and maybe that helps us understand that the Bible's a story. And so understanding this first part matters. And you should always start at the first part, right, of any fairy tale. You're not going to start at the end. So this isn't a point to die on, but maybe you've thought of the Bible as more of a scientific telling. Know that it's for your life, it's for theological points, and so it's in a story form. Once upon a time, or once, right? So, our next word, God, Elohim. And let's just jump right into this. Your word Elohim in the Bible is translated two different ways, not so much in spelling, although sometimes yes, but primarily in capitalization. You have the word God, capital G-O-D, to refer to our Yahweh usually, and also the lowercase G-O-D to refer to, usually people would assume fake gods or other gods in the Bible. I think this is a wrong thinking because it is the same word. So what exactly is it? By the way, im in Hebrew makes it a plural. So keep that in mind. But here's a couple of verses. There's plenty of verses on this if you want to check out Elohim in the Bible, but we'll just use these two. Elohim presides in the assembly of El, shortening of Elohim. In the midst of the Elohim, he renders judgment. So how can God be in the midst of himself? That becomes a problem, and if you read the rest of Psalm 82, you understand he's judging. He's judging the other gods. So is he judging himself? And I would say probably not, right? And because here's an even clearer one. For your Lord, your Elohim, is Elohim of Elohims. So a common understanding of God would say God is God of gods. But that's not really that impressive if you're God. You're the top. Like if I say he's a man among men, but if there's only one man, then there's one man, that's not that impressive. Rather, though, the comparison only works if there's multiple, and God is the God of all the gods. He's the chief God, right? And I think that's what it presents. Not to say that God isn't the ultimate God, but that there are many. And so here's a point that you're probably dealing with right now, is the word God has been developed to mean our one God, right, ruler of the universe, and that's not being challenged. What is being challenged is our word that we understand as God, because God really doesn't mean that. All religions have a bunch of gods, right? How does that work? Because God is rather spirit. It denotes nature, and so you have humans. You have humans denoting a physical realm. Like if you're an earthling, then you live in the corporeal. You live in the physical place where you need food and substance, etc. But if you're Elohim, that means you are spiritual. You're spiritual beings. So God is a spiritual being, and our Bible starts with something like that. It doesn't tell us who the spiritual being is per se. It just says there is a spirit. Now, hold on. Genesis 2 does tell us what spirit is. It says Yahweh. It finally starts using that language, but it starts the story off with once a spirit. And it's vague, but we find out. But it's important to start this way. That's Elohim. Let's try the next one, and this is kind of the hinge word for the whole first sentence. Created in the beginning, God created, right? Is the word bara up here, B-A-R-A. And I already have ordered up there. Gave it away for you, but I have two verses to challenge that for you. I form the light in bara darkness. I bring prosperity in bara disaster. I, the Lord, do all these things. So our normal understanding of create is to poof, right? God creates the heavens and the earth. He poofs them here. But how does this work here? God creates darkness. I've never seen that before. God creates disaster. That seems to be a problem. Well, if you look up the word bara, its secondary meaning, which I present should be its first meaning, is to form. Then you take something that's already existent, that's out of order, and you form it into something structural that is useful. And I mean, look at this verse, ready? A little bit later in Genesis, so you'd think they'd use the same stuff in the same chapter of the Bible. So God bara man in his own image. In the image of God, bara he met him, male and female bara he them. How did God make man? And how did God make woman? For a man, he took dirt, right? Something that's already there, and he formed it to make a man. And then same with the woman, with a rib. And so bara here is more, he ordered it. He put it into order so that it could be something. He didn't poof it, right? And so that makes sense up here, because God didn't create darkness like, oh, poof, darkness, and I'm going to create disaster. No, he took the darkness and he ordered it to bring light. And he took the disaster and he ordered it to bring prosperity, just like Romans says, all things work together for the good of those who love God, right? Even these terrible disasters are ordered by God into something good. So our word created isn't poof, it's God taking something that is out of order, namely the heavens and the earth, and bringing it into order. But what about the heavens and the earth? The heavens, shamayim is our word. Does God reside in the sky? Does heavens mean God's residence, where he lives, like the streets of gold, or does it mean the sky? And I present to you there's a problem with that because of our thinking, and I should have put these in order, but here's just a definition. Let's start with that. A place regarded in various religions as the abode of God, where God lives. And then the secondary, literal interpretation is the sky, right? And so we think, so is heavens where God lives, or is it the sky? I don't know. They didn't think that way. They're thinking in not in a separation of the physical and the material mindset. So there's a dualism happening. Might not be the right word, but the point being is their spiritual and their physical are completely connected. So here's an example. Actually, let's start with this one. The example of Jacob became angry with Rachel, and he said, "Am I in the place of God who has kept you from having children?" Of course, we know today that it's DNA. Of course, we know, right, that it's DNA and other differences that would keep someone from bearing a child. Well, Jacob says, "Am I in the place of God?" So they equate the physical nature of that with physical problems with something that God is doing, right? And same with here. Let me read it to you, and you decide who's God here, right? The Lord thunders over the mighty waters. The voice of the Lord is powerful. The voice of the Lord is majestic. The voice of the Lord breaks the cedars. The Lord breaks in pieces the cedars of Lebanon. He makes Lebanon leap like a calf, Mount Hermon like a young wild ox. The voice of the Lord strikes with flashes of lightning. The voice of the Lord shakes the desert. The Lord shakes the desert of Kadesh. The voice of the Lord twists the oaks and strips the forest bare. What is he? He is a thunderstorm, right? Hopefully you caught on that. He thunders over the mighty waters. His voice is powerful. He strikes with lightning the Lebanons. And so this isn't that crazy for them, because God can be associated with these physical things. And I mean, even when we think of Jesus, right? Very physical. And so when we get to our word for heaven, it's not crazy to say that the heavens, God abode, is up there. My pointer is at the ceiling, right? And so our translation, and just like a normal translation could say, heavens, don't think of streets, etc., but that God, or once upon a time, a spirit, ordered the skies, right? What else did they order? Close your eyes really quick. Let me try this. Let's see how much time I got. And tell me what you see. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was formless and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. Okay, you can open up. Someone tell me what they saw. I'm guessing, let me just try this. I'm guessing that you saw a formless ball with water over it, and darkness, something along those lines, and you're suspended in space looking at it. Well, let me present to you that they did not see this because they did not have this worldview. First of all, they thought the earth was flat. That's something else to get into, but not right now. But primarily, we didn't even have images of this till 1960, and then before that, 1500s, about Copernicus was the guy who was seeing, okay, we're in this interesting rotation. The point being, though, when they say earth, this is the word for our spherical ball that they're thinking of. Rather, it's under our feet, right? The earthy substance under our feet. And so maybe a better translation of earth, they're not thinking cosmically like we would and scientifically and always trying to answer these scientific questions. They're thinking practically. They're ground under our feet. That is what God is making right and separating the waters from, etc., right? So not to be cocky, but here is my final translation, and it's not just my translation, but like I said, I'm getting it from other people, standing on other people's shoulders. Once a spirit ordered the skies and the ground. Genesis 1:1. Yeah. So I think this helps us form the whole story, because remember, the beginning of a story matters, right? You're not going to start halfway through. You need to understand the beginning. So what is God doing? He's taking this, because here's the next verse, we won't get into it, but the earth was without form and void, darkness was over the face of the deep. He's taking this messed up place, this oceany, deserty place, which, by the way, these two descriptions, the face of the deep, that's water, without form and void, that's only described the wilderness for the Israelites, which is just desert, right? He's taking these places and he's ordering it. In the beginning, God ordered the sky and the ground. He's ordering these two places to make them suitable for humans. And that's the whole beginning of the story, right? Well, interestingly, this is not the only place we find this. In fact, this is repeated hundreds of times throughout the Bible. I believe this is the main point of the Bible, which is why it starts with this. So hear me out on this one. On that day, when evening came, Jesus said to his disciples, let's go across to the other side of the lake. So after leaving the crowd, they took him along, just as he was in the boat, and other boats were with him. Now a great windstorm developed, and the waves were breaking into the boat, so that the boat nearly was swamped. But he was in the stern, sleeping on the cushion. They woke him up and said to him, Teacher, don't you care that we are about to die? So he got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the sea, Be quiet, calm down. Then the wind stopped, and it was dead calm. And he said to them, Why are you so cowardly? Why do you still not have faith? They were overwhelmed by fear and said to one another, Who then is this? Even the winds and the sea obey him. And now you have Jesus, doing, doing the same thing that God did in the beginning, taking the disorderly water and calming it and settling it down, ordering it, right? And so, I'll just read it. The whole story of the Bible presents Yahweh, or Jesus, as King of the world and expects readers to respond with allegiance to him. We see the proof of his kingliness at the resurrection. God proves more than anything, just like he did in Genesis, at the resurrection when he's given a crown and a scepter and a robe and exalted that he's king. Because why? When I say the word order, and maybe this ties it together, and this is why it's a better translation, when I say someone ordered something, or how about I ordered you to do something, maybe it makes more sense. Maybe you think of a military commander, in their time they're thinking of kings. They're the ones who give order. And so the fact that God ordered the heavens and the earth with his voice is what we find out, right? Speaking, is that God is the king. He's the king to be submitted to. And that's what the whole Bible presents us to us. So we can either choose to believe or reject the new king. And in the end, we're told all knees will bow. But the point is that the gospel is of God the King. So by the way, euangelion is our word for the good news. But the good news is only is ever about an announcement of a new king. So yeah, go check out usages and all different types of ancient literature. It's the good news is always referring to a new king. And so when the good news comes on in the Gospels, it's not just simply, oh, this is good news, we're saved. No, we're saved because we have a king who can order this chaotic world. So I think it's most important to know that our new king isn't just some random king like a pharaoh. It's Jesus. And what kind of king is Jesus? He's the king who accepts you as you are, as a deserted, chaotic, watery place, and is willing to fix you. Switchfoot has a song. I'll sing it for you. And you got oceans trapped in your eyelids. And this is biblical metaphors he's using because it's all over the Psalms, etc. He's saying you have oceans in your head. And maybe you're familiar with Shakespeare. He does the same thing a lot. The idea that the oceans aren't really the problem in Genesis 1. The problem's inside of us, that we have a chaotic ocean mess of our lives and that needs ordering, and a land that needs ordering. And Jesus is the king who says, I'll give you commands, and if you choose to follow me, submit to my kingship. That's not so much submit to everything I say, and you must do this to be saved. It's come under me as your king. Say, okay, Jesus, you are the true king who can order my life in the kingdom that is free from fear and slavery. So I will come under your kingship and be ruled by you and be taught by you as a good king who can order my life, right? So yeah, plenty of sources. If you have any questions, feel free to say so. I think I've gone over my time, but hopefully this was beneficial, and hopefully we can all learn to submit to God's kingship daily and let him order our chaotic messes of our lives into something that is life-giving and fruitful like the Garden of Eden, right? Okay. Thank you.